The Galactic Council chambers had never witnessed such tension. Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire stood at the central podium, his crystalline exoskeleton catching the artificial light as he addressed the assembled delegates. Representatives from 47 different species filled the tiered seating, their various forms of communication creating a low hum of translated conversations. "The Void Hunters have breached the Outer Rim," Kethvar announced, his voice carrying the weight of impending doom. 3-star systems have already fallen. Epsilon Eridani, Wolf 359, and now Proxima Centauri. They consume everything in their path, leaving nothing but empty space where once thriving worlds existed. A collective shudder ran through the assembly. The Void Hunters were the galaxy's nightmare made manifest, a species that had evolved beyond physical form into pure destructive energy. They appeared as swirling masses of darkness that devoured matter itself, converting it into raw power to fuel their endless hunger. "How long do we have?" asked Delegate Morntel, her serpentine form coiled nervously around her speaking platform. The Scythian representative's skin had shifted to deep purple, indicating extreme anxiety among her species. "Our best estimates suggest 6 standard months before they reach the core worlds," Kethvar replied grimly. "Perhaps less if they continue to accelerate their advance." The chamber erupted in panicked discussions. The Klaxon delegation, resembling giant mantises, clicked their mandibles rapidly in their excitement language. The aquatic Merdani representatives bubbled frantically in their water-filled speaking chambers. Even the stoic granite folk, living rock beings who typically remained silent for decades, showed signs of agitation as small tremors ran through their massive forms. "What of our combined fleets?" called out General Vextar of the Talon Pride, his leonine features twisted in a war snarl. The Talon Pride were renowned as the galaxy's fiercest warriors, their natural predatory instincts enhanced by advanced technology. "Surely our united forces can stop these entities." Kethvar's silence spoke volumes before he finally answered. 3 fleets have already engaged the Void Hunters. The survivors report that conventional weapons pass through them harmlessly. Energy weapons only seem to feed their growth. The few ships that escaped described watching entire battlecruisers simply dissolve. The weight of this revelation settled over the assembly like a burial shroud. If the combined military might of dozens of species couldn't stop the Void Hunters, what hope did they have? "There must be something," insisted Counselor Urin of the Hive Mind. The insectoid being's compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights like scattered diamonds. "Some weakness, some vulnerability we can exploit. Our scientists have been working around the clock," Kethvar replied. "The only consistent pattern they've identified is that the Void Hunters seem to avoid certain energy signatures. Specifically, they retreat from areas with high concentrations of what our translators can only render as life force or soul energy." "Meaningless mysticism," scoffed Dr. Zelnoth, the Cerebral Collective's representative. The brain creature floated in its life support sphere, neural tendrils writhing dismissively. "If we're reduced to chasing fairy tales, we might as well surrender now." "Not fairy tales," interrupted a new voice from the gallery. All heads turned to see a figure that many had overlooked until now. Human Ambassador Sarah Chun stood up slowly from her seat in the less prestigious upper tiers, where newer galactic members were traditionally placed. "The humans wish to speak?" Kethvar asked, unable to hide his surprise. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Council 15 years ago, after their world was discovered by a routine survey mission. They were considered a primitive species, barely having achieved faster-than-light travel, and their military capabilities were deemed insignificant by galactic standards. "If I may," Sarah said, walking down to the speaker's platform with measured steps. She was unremarkable by galactic standards, standing only 5.5 feet tall with brown hair and dark eyes. Her simple blue diplomatic uniform looked plain compared to the elaborate ceremonial garments of other delegates. "Humanity has experience with entities that feed on life force," she continued, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic enhancement systems. On our world, we call them many things. Demons, spirits, wraiths. Different cultures, different names, but the same basic concept. Primitive superstitions, Dr. Zelnoth interjected, his neural tendrils pulsing with intellectual disdain. Are they? Sarah asked calmly. What you're describing, these void hunters, matches almost perfectly with accounts from our oldest stories. Entities of pure hunger that devour everything they touch, that grow stronger with each consumption. She paused, looking around the chamber. But here's the thing about human stories. They always include a way to fight back. And the weapons against such entities are never conventional. They require something else. Something from the spirit rather than the laboratory. And what exactly are you proposing? General Vextar asked, his tone mixing curiosity with skepticism. Let us send a representative, Sarah said simply. Someone who embodies what humanity has learned about fighting the impossible. The chamber fell silent for a long moment before nervous laughter began to ripple through the assembly. The idea that humanity, one of the galaxy's newest and most technologically backward species, could contribute anything meaningful to this crisis seemed absurd. With respect, Ambassador Chun, Kethvar said diplomatically, this is a threat that has defeated the combined might of our greatest warriors and most advanced civilizations. What could your species possibly offer that we lack? Sarah's expression didn't change. Hope, she said quietly. Stubbornness. And sandwiches. The last word caused a stir of confusion throughout the chamber. Universal translators struggled with the concept, providing wildly different interpretations across species. I beg your pardon? Kethvar asked. You asked what we could offer. Those are humanity's greatest weapons against the impossible. Hope that refuses to die, stubbornness that won't accept defeat, and the ability to find something worth protecting even in the darkest times. The sandwiches, well, you'll understand if you meet our representative. Before anyone could respond, alarms began wailing throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the chamber in red as automated systems announced in multiple languages, Priority alert. Priority alert. All council members report to designated emergency positions. Kethvar activated his personal communication device, his expression growing more grim with each passing second. The Void Hunters have accelerated their advance. They've somehow bypassed our early warning systems and are now only 3 months out from the core worlds. Panic began to spread through the chamber. Some delegates immediately departed for their shuttles, intent on returning to their home worlds to coordinate defenses. Others huddled in groups, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Time is running out, General Vextar announced. The Talon Pride's greatest warriors are already assembling. We'll meet these entities with Fong and Claw, with courage and honor. If we're going to die, we'll die fighting. The hive mind soldier castes are mobilizing as well, added Counselor Uran. Our warriors fear nothing, not even entities of pure destruction. One by one, the various species began announcing their military preparations. The Zephyrians spoke of their crystal-powered energy weapons. The Granite Folk promised to call up their siege specialists. Even a normally pacifist Mayor Danny mentioned activating their defensive biotechnology. Through it all, Sarah Chun stood quietly at the speaker's platform, waiting. And what of humanity? Dr. Zelnoth finally asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Will you be sending your fiercest warriors as well? Your most advanced technology? No, Sarari Plaith Gamli. We're sending Jake. Jake? Multiple delegates asked simultaneously, universal translators again struggling with the simple human name. Jake Morrison. He's a mechanic at the Luna Station repair facility. Fixes shuttles and cargo haulers mostly. Good with his hands, better with people. Makes excellent sandwiches. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the background hum of the station's systems seemed muted. You're not serious, General Vextar said finally. You want to send a common laborer against entities that have destroyed entire star systems? I'm completely serious, Sarah replied. But I understand your confusion. Most species think in terms of strength against strength, technology against technology. Humans learned a long time ago that sometimes the biggest problems require the smallest solutions. This is madness, Dr. Zelnoth declared. We're facing extinction, and you want to send a sandwich maker. A mechanic who makes sandwiches, Sarah corrected gently. There's a difference. Mechanics fix things that are broken. And right now, hope is the most broken thing in this galaxy. Kethvar raised one crystalline hand for silence. Ambassador Chun, I respect your species' optimism, but surely you understand the magnitude of this crisis. These void hunters have consumed 3 entire star systems. They've destroyed fleets that could reduce planets to dust. What possible difference could one individual make? Sarah was quiet for a moment, then smiled slightly. You know what's interesting about mechanics? They don't see big problems. They just see a lot of small problems that need solving one at a time. Take apart the engine, clean the parts, put it back together. Simple. The Void Hunters aren't a broken engine, protested Delegate Morntel. Aren't they? Sarah asked. Something corrupted their nature, made them into consumers instead of creators. Something broke the balance of their existence. Jake's pretty good at finding what's broken and fixing it. And if your mechanic fails? General Vextar asked bluntly. Then he fails, Sarah said simply. But he'll fail while doing something no one else thought to try. He'll fail while making sure everyone around him has had something to eat. He'll fail while never giving up hope that tomorrow can be better than today. She looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates. Your warriors are brave. Your scientists are brilliant. Your technologies are amazing. But courage and intelligence and power aren't going to solve this problem. This needs something else. Something simple and human and stubbornly optimistic. Very well, Kethvar said after a long pause. The situation is desperate enough that we cannot afford to dismiss any possibility. However, unconventional. Your representative will be given the same resources and support as any other. He won't need much, Sarah said. A small ship, basic supplies, maybe a kitchen. Jake travels light. A kitchen, several delegates asked in unison. For the sandwiches, Sarah explained patiently. You can't save the galaxy on an empty stomach. As the emergency session dissolved into smaller planning groups, Sarah Chun gathered her things and prepared to leave. The other delegates gave her a wide berth, many shaking their heads in disbelief. To them, humanity's response to the crisis seemed like the height of foolishness. They had no way of knowing that across the galaxy, on a small space station orbiting Earth's moon, a middle-aged man in oil-stained coveralls was just finishing his shift. Jake Morrison wiped his hands on a rag and looked out at the stars through the repair bay's transparent aluminum window, completely unaware that his quiet, ordinary life was about to intersect with the fate of every living being in the galaxy. In the distance, invisible to all conventional sensors, something dark and hungry continued its relentless advance toward the core worlds. The Void Hunters moved through space like a cosmic cancer, leaving only emptiness in their wake. They had consumed countless civilizations across eons of existence, growing stronger with each feeding. But they had never encountered sandwiches, and they had certainly never met Jake Morrison. Jake Morrison was elbow-deep in the engine compartment of a Martian cargo hauler when his supervisor's voice echoed through the Luna Station repair bay. Morrison, front desk, you got visitors. Jake pulled himself out of the engine housing, wiping grease from his hands with the perpetually stained rag he kept tucked in his belt. At 52, he had the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades working with his hands. His brown hair was streaked with premature gray, and laugh lines crinkled around his blue eyes. He wasn't particularly tall or muscular, but there was something solid about him, like a well-built tool that could be relied upon to work properly no matter the circumstances. The repair bay was Jake's domain, a controlled chaos of spare parts, diagnostic equipment, and half-assembled machinery. The familiar smell of metal, lubricants, and ozone from welding torches filled the air. It was a place where broken things came to be made whole again, which suited Jake just fine. He made his way to the front desk, expecting to find another frustrated captain whose ship had broken down at the worst possible moment. Instead, he found three individuals in official-looking uniforms waiting for him. One was human, a woman he didn't recognize wearing the blue and gold of the diplomatic corps. The other two were decidedly not human. "Jake Morrison?" the human woman asked. "That's me," he replied, unconsciously wiping his hands again despite the rag being thoroughly saturated with grease. Though if this is about the Henderson account, I already explained that the delay was due to parts availability, not. "Mr. Morrison, I'm Ambassador Saracen. This is Commander Veltar of the Talon Pride and Dr. Zixaniel of the Meridian Sciences Institute. We need to speak with you about a matter of galactic security." Jake blinked slowly, processing this information. Galactic security? Perhaps we could speak somewhere more private? Commander Veltar suggested. The leonine alien stood nearly 7 feet tall, his golden fur marked with intricate ceremonial scarring. His voice carried the weight of command and barely contained violence. "Sure," Jake said, leading them to his small office adjacent to the repair bay. The space was cramped but organized, with technical manuals lining shelves that also held an eclectic collection of coffee mugs from various planets. A small refrigerator hummed in one corner, next to a coffee maker that had seen better days. "Can I get you folks some coffee?" Jake asked, settling behind his desk. "I've got some good stuff from the Centauri colonies." "This is not a social visit," Commander Veltar said impatiently. "We are here on a mission of utmost importance." "Right," Jake said, pouring himself a cup despite the alien's obvious irritation. "Galactic security. What's that got to do with me?" Dr. Zixanel, who resembled an upright dolphin with crystalline blue skin, activated a holographic projector. Images of destroyed star systems appeared in the air above Jake's desk, showing empty space where planets once orbited dead suns. These are the former locations of 3 star systems consumed by entities known as the Void Hunters, Dr. Zixanel explained, his voice carrying an odd harmonic quality. "They are beings of pure destructive energy that devour matter itself." Jake studied the images while sipping his coffee. "Nasty," he said finally. "But, again, what's this got to do with me? I fix ships, not whatever those things are." The Galactic Council has agreed to allow each member species to send their finest representatives to combat this threat, Ambassador Chen explained. "Humanity has chosen you." Jake nearly choked on his coffee. "Me? I think there's been some kind of mistake. I'm not a soldier, or a scientist, or anything special. I just fix things." "That's exactly why you were chosen," Chen said. "The traditional approach isn't working. These entities can't be fought with conventional weapons or defeated through standard military tactics. They consume energy, grow stronger from conflict, and seem to feed on the very concept of destruction." "Okay," Jake said slowly, "but I still don't see what I can do about it." Commander Veltar leaned forward, his predatory gaze fixed on Jake. "The Council's finest warriors are already assembling. The Pack's deadliest fighters, the Hive Mind's perfect soldiers, the Granite Folk's unstoppable siege specialists. We bring Fong and Claw, honor and courage. And humanity brings you," Dr. Zixanel added, his tone suggesting deep skepticism about this decision. Jake set down his coffee cup and leaned back in his chair. "You know what? This sounds like the kind of problem that requires people way smarter than me. I appreciate the offer, really, but I think you've got the wrong guy." "Mr. Morrison," Ambassador Chen said gently, "may I ask you something?" "Sure." "When you encounter a machine that everyone else says is irreparably broken, what do you do?" Jake shrugged. "Look at it myself. Sometimes what everyone thinks is broken just needs a different approach." "Why?" "Because that's exactly what this situation requires. A different approach." The holographic display shifted, showing tactical analyses of previous encounters with the Void Hunters. Jake found himself studying the data despite his reluctance to get involved. Years of diagnosing mechanical problems had given him a methodical mind that automatically looked for patterns and inconsistencies. These energy signatures, he said, pointing to a cluster of readings. They're inconsistent. Look at the fluctuation patterns. Dr. Zixanael's eyes widened slightly. You can read meridian tactical analysis charts? No, but I can read energy patterns. Spent 20 years troubleshooting fusion reactors before I came here. This, he gestured at the display. This doesn't look like a weapon. It looks like something that's been damaged. Damaged how? Commander Veltar asked, his impatience giving way to curiosity. Well, if I had to guess, I'd say these entities weren't always destructive. Something corrupted their base programming, made them into consumers instead of, well, whatever they were supposed to be. The three visitors exchanged glances. That's remarkably similar to our scientists' preliminary theories, Dr. Zixanael admitted. But even if that's correct, the technical knowledge required to repair such entities would be beyond even the most advanced civilizations. Maybe, Jake said, or maybe it just needs someone who's good at finding what's broken and fixing it one piece at a time. He stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the repair bay. Below, several of his colleagues were working on various projects, their movements efficient and purposeful. It was a sight that always calmed him, the simple process of taking broken things and making them whole again. I've got a question for you folks, he said without turning around. What happens to all these warriors and scientists and specialists if they fail? They die honorably, Commander Veltar replied immediately. No. I mean, what happens to the people who are counting on them? The families, the children, the ordinary folks who are just trying to get by. The silence stretched long enough that Jake turned back to face his visitors. That's what I thought, he said quietly. See, that's the thing about being a mechanic. You don't just fix machines. You fix people's lives. Every ship I repair belongs to someone who needs it to work. Cargo haulers feeding families, passenger shuttles reconnecting loved ones, survey vessels helping expand our understanding of the universe. He moved back to his desk and picked up a small framed photograph of a family picnic. My daughter Emma and her kids live on Titan. If these void hunters reach the core systems, they'll be right in the path of destruction. Same with millions of other families. All the more reason to leave this to trained professionals, Dr. Zixanael said. All the more reason for me to try, Jake replied. Look, I'm not brave like the commander here. I'm not brilliant like you, Doctor. But I'm stubborn, and I don't give up on things that can be fixed. Ambassador Chun smiled slightly. There's something else, isn't there? Jake grinned back. Yeah, I make really good sandwiches. I fail to see how food preparation skills are relevant to this crisis, Commander Veltar said. You will, Jake said confidently. Trust me on that one. He moved to the small refrigerator and began pulling out ingredients. Anyone hungry? I find it's easier to think on a full stomach. Before anyone could protest, Jake had assembled 3 sandwiches with practiced efficiency. The bread was fresh, the meat and cheese perfectly proportioned, and each sandwich included what appeared to be a secret blend of seasonings and sauces. I really don't think this is appropriate, Dr. Zixanael began, but fell silent as the aroma reached him. Something about the smell was unexpectedly appealing, even to his alien physiology. Just try it, Jake said, handing out the sandwiches. Trust me, Commander Veltar took a cautious bite, his enhanced senses immediately detecting the complex interplay of flavors. His eyes widened slightly. This is remarkably good. Dr. Zixanael, despite his crystalline physiology being adapted for a liquid-based diet, found that the sandwich's flavors translated perfectly through his chemical analysis organs. The flavor combinations are precisely calibrated for maximum appeal across different sensory systems. It's not about the calibration, Jake said, settling back with his own sandwich. It's about caring enough to make something that brings people together. Food is universal language. Doesn't matter what planet you're from or how many arms you have. A good meal shared with others creates connection. As they ate, something subtle but profound happened in the small office. The tension that had marked their initial meeting began to fade. Commander veletaş aggressive posture relaxed. Dr. Zixnael's clinical detachment softened. Even Ambassador Chen seemed more at ease. This is what you bring to the fight, Jay continued between bites. Not weapons or advanced technology. Connection. Hope. The belief that tomorrow can be better than today, one small act of kindness at a time. But the Void Hunters, Dr. Zixnael began, are broken, Jake interrupted gently. And broken things can be fixed if you approach them with patience, understanding, and the right tools. And you believe sandwiches are the right tools? Commander Veltar asked, though his tone had lost its earlier skepticism. I believe caring is the right tool, Jake replied. The sandwiches are just how I express it. See, most people look at a problem and see something to defeat. I look at a problem and see something that needs help. He gestured toward the holographic display, which was still showing the devastating aftermath of the Void Hunter's passage. Those entities aren't evil. They're sick. Something broke them, corrupted their purpose, turned them into destructive forces. But if they were made, they can be unmade. If they were corrupted, they can be healed. The combined fleets of 47 species couldn't stop them, Dr. Zixnael pointed out. Because they try to fight fire with fire, Jake said. Sometimes you need water instead. Commander Veltar finished his sandwich and sat back, studying Jake with new interest. You truly believe you can succeed where our greatest warriors have failed. I believe I can try something different, Jake replied honestly. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But if I don't try, and those things reach the core systems, I'll spend whatever time I've left knowing I could have done something, and didn't. Ambassador Chen stood up, decision made. We'll need to depart within the hour. The Council is providing a small, but fast ship equipped with the latest stealth technology. What about my job here? Jake asked. Saving the galaxy takes priority over ship repairs, she replied with a slight smile. Jake nodded and began gathering a few personal items from his office. I'll need to pack some supplies. Can't make sandwiches without ingredients. The ship will be fully stocked, Dr. Zixnael assured him. Not with the right things, Jake said. There's a difference between food and a meal, just like there's a difference between existing and living. As they prepared to leave, Commander Veltar placed a massive hand on Jake's shoulder. Mechanic Morrison, I still believe this mission requires warriors. But perhaps it also requires whatever it is you represent. Hope, Jake said simply. I represent hope that refuses to quit, kindness that doesn't calculate the odds, and the stubborn human belief that every problem has a solution if you're willing to work hard enough to find it. They left Luna Station an hour later aboard a sleek courier vessel designed for speed and stealth. As Earth and its moon fell behind them, Jake stood at the observation port, watching humanity's home system disappear into the star field. Somewhere ahead, moving inexorably toward the galaxy's heart, ancient entities of pure destruction continued their relentless advance. They had devoured civilizations, consumed star systems, and defeated the greatest military forces the galaxy could assemble. But they had never encountered a middle-aged mechanic who made excellent sandwiches and refused to believe that anything was beyond repair. The staging area for Operation Final Stand was a massive space station designated Bastion 7, hastily constructed in the neutral zone between the core worlds and the advancing Void Hunters. The station bustled with activity as representatives from dozens of species prepared for what many believed would be the galaxy's last desperate gambit. Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle and into chaos. The main hangar bay stretched for nearly a kilometer in every direction, filled with beings that represented the absolute pinnacle of their respective species' military capabilities. Towering granite folk stood motionless like living mountains, their stone-like forms adorned with weapons that could level cities. Talon Pride warriors prowled the deck in perfect formation, their movements a deadly dance of barely contained violence. Impressive, isn't it? Ambassador Chun said, joining Jake at the shuttle's ramp. Every being here has been selected as the ultimate warrior of their kind. Jake watched a squad of hive-mind soldiers march past in perfect synchronization, their insectoid forms moving as a single organism. There's certainly something, he agreed. Where's the cafeteria? Dr. Dixonell, who had remained with their group during the 3-day journey, made a sound that his translator rendered as confusion. Surely your first priority should be reviewing tactical data or consulting with the strategic command. My first priority is always making sure everyone's fed properly, Jake replied, shouldering his duffel bag. Hungry people make bad decisions. Besides, I need to set up my kitchen. Your kitchen? Komandør Veltar asked. This is a military staging area, not a restaurant. Same difference, Jake said cheerfully. Both places where you prepare to give people what they need. The next several hours passed in a blur of orientation briefings, tactical discussions, and increasingly desperate planning sessions. Jake attended them all, listening carefully while taking notes in a worn leather notebook that looked decidedly out of place among the advanced holographic displays and quantum computers being used by other representatives. The situation was worse than they had initially believed. The Void Hunters were not only moving faster than predicted, but they had also begun exhibiting new behaviors. Instead of simply consuming matter and moving on, they were now lingering in consumed systems, apparently feeding on the empty space itself. They're growing stronger, Dr. Yelnoth of the Cerebral Collective explained during the main briefing. The brain creature's neural tendrils writhed anxiously as holographic displays showed the expanding zones of absolute void. Each system they consume appears to increase their mass and energy output exponentially. General Krennics of the United Fleet stood at the center of the command amphitheater, his scarred features grim. Our combined forces are already in position along the defensive line. 17 battle fleets, representing the finest ships and crews in the galaxy. If we can't stop them here, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the amphitheater understood the implications. What about the research into their energy patterns? Asked Captain Morden of the Zephyrian Crystal Guard. Has anyone discovered a weakness we can exploit? Dr. Yelnoth's form dimmed slightly, indicating distress. All conventional approaches have failed. Energy weapons feed them. Kinetic weapons pass through them harmlessly. Even our most advanced quantum disruptors have no effect. Then, we fight with what remains, declared Warsinger Telnara of the Melodic Hegemony. Her crystalline form rang with harmonic undertones that translated as fierce determination. If we cannot destroy them, we will at least ensure they remember our defiance. Jake had been quietly taking notes throughout the briefing, but now he raised his hand. The gesture was so simple, so civilian, that it took several seconds for anyone to notice. Yes, General Krennics asked, his tone suggesting barely controlled impatience. I have a question about these energy patterns, Jake said, standing up in the amphitheater's human section. He looked small and insignificant compared to the warriors surrounding him. The data shows they avoid certain frequencies. Has anyone tried to figure out why? Dr. Yelnoth's neural tendrils focused on Jake with something approaching interest. The avoidance behavior appears random. There is no consistent pattern. Are you sure? Jake asked, pulling out his notebook. Because looking at your data, it seems like they consistently retreat from frequencies associated with what you're calling life force. Superstitious nonsense, Dr. Yelnoth replied dismissively. There is no such thing as measurable life force. Maybe not the way you measure things, Jake said calmly. But there are other kinds of measurements, other ways of looking at problems. He made his way down to the central display area, his work boots echoing strangely in the vast space. May I? General Krennics gestured toward the holographic controls with obvious reluctance. Jake studied the display for several minutes, occasionally making notes or asking the computer to highlight specific data sets. The assembled warriors watched with growing impatience as the human mechanic pored over information that had already been analyzed by the galaxy's greatest minds. There, Jake said finally, pointing to a section of the display. Look at this pattern. The entities retreat from areas with high concentrations of what your sensors classify as quantum resonance anomalies. But if you overlay this data with biological activity reports, the display shifted, showing a new correlation that no one had previously noticed. The Void Hunters consistently avoided areas where large populations of living beings were gathered together in states of what the computers could only classify as emotional harmony. Impossible, Dr. Yelnoth declared. Emotions cannot be quantified in meaningful ways. Can't they? Jake asked. What about when a hive mind achieves perfect synchronization? Or when a Talon pride pack bonds for the hunt? Or when the melodic hegemony achieves harmonic resonance? He gestured toward representatives of each species as he spoke. You all know these states exist. Your cultures are built around them. The question is, what if these emotional states create something that the Void Hunters literally cannot digest? The amphitheater fell silent as this concept sank in. It was both absurdly simple and completely revolutionary. You're suggesting that feelings can be weaponized? Warsinger Telnara asked, her harmonic tones carrying notes of incredulous hope. I'm suggesting that maybe the weapon has been inside us all along, Jake replied. These entities consume matter and energy, but what if they can't consume things like love, hope, determination, or the bond between comrades? Even if that were true, General Krennics interjected, how would we deploy such a weapon? You cannot simply order an entire population to feel harmonious emotions. Jake smiled. Actually, you kind of can. At least, you can create the conditions where those emotions naturally emerge. He looked around the amphitheater at the gathered representatives. What brings people together? What creates the kind of emotional bonds that transcend species barriers? Kumbat, suggested Commander Veltar. Shared danger forges the strongest bonds. Music, offered war singer Telnara. Harmony creates unity. Shared purpose, added Captain Morden. Common goals align different minds. All good answers, Jake agreed. But there's something even more basic. Something that works across every species, every culture, every biological configuration. He paused dramatically, sharing a meal. The silence that followed was deafening. You want to defeat entities of cosmic destruction with food service? Dr. Yelnoth asked, his neural tendrils practically trembling with indignation. I want to create the conditions where every being in this galaxy remembers what they're fighting for, Jay corrected. Not just survival, but the simple joys that make survival worthwhile. The connections that make life meaningful. He gestured toward the display, showing the approaching Void Hunters. These entities have forgotten what they were supposed to be. They've become pure consumption, pure hunger. But what's the opposite of consuming? Creating, whispered Ambassador Chun, beginning to understand. Sharing, added Commander Veltar, his predatory features showing the first signs of hope. Caring for others, finished war singer Telnara, her harmonic tones shifting to frequencies that registered as amazement. Jake nodded. Exactly. And there's no act that combines all three more perfectly than preparing and sharing food with others. General Krennics looked skeptical. This is still highly theoretical. Even if your hypothesis is correct, we're talking about creating emotional resonance across multiple star systems simultaneously. The logistics alone would be impossible. Would they? Jake asked. How many people are in the evacuation zones right now? How many refugees are gathered on planets behind our defensive lines? Approximately 47 billion beings across 12 species, Dr. Yelnoth replied automatically. All scared, all desperate, all feeling helpless while they wait to see if the warriors can save them. Jay continued. What if instead of just waiting, they participated? What if every refugee camp, every evacuation center, every gathered population became a node in a galaxy-wide network of shared hope? He turned back to the holographic display. Your quantum communication networks can coordinate military operations across thousands of light years in real time. Could they coordinate something like a galaxy-wide community meal? The question hung in the air like a challenge. The technical aspects were certainly possible, but the concept seemed almost childishly naive in the face of such cosmic threat. "It's insane," General Krennics said finally. "It's beautiful," War Singer Telnara countered, her tones ringing with sudden enthusiasm. "It's never been tried, Dr. Yelnoth added, which for a scientist was practically an endorsement. Commander Veltar stood slowly, his massive form casting shadows across the amphitheater. "Mechanic Morrison, your plan requires trust between species that have been enemies for millennia. It requires coordination on a scale never before attempted. It requires every being in the galaxy to believe in something they cannot see or touch." Jake met the warrior's gaze steadily. "Yes, sir, it does. And you truly believe this will work?" Jake was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "Commander, I've spent my entire career fixing things that everyone else said couldn't be fixed. Sometimes the solution isn't more power or better technology. Sometimes you just need to remember what the machine was built to do in the first place." He gestured toward the display, showing the Void Hunter's approach. These entities were created for a purpose. Maybe that purpose was to clean up cosmic debris, or process dead matter, or maintain some kind of universal balance. But something corrupted that purpose, turned them into destroyers instead of maintainers. "You're talking about reprogramming entities of pure energy, Dr. Yelnoth protested. "The technological requirements would be beyond our capabilities." "I'm not talking about reprogramming them," Jake replied. "I'm talking about reminding them, showing them what they've forgotten by demonstrating ourselves." He looked around the amphitheater at the assembled representatives of the galaxy's greatest civilizations. What if the Void Hunters aren't our enemy? What if they're just broken, and they've been waiting for someone to show them how to be whole again? The implications of this perspective shift rippled through the assembled crowd. If Jake was right, then everything they thought they knew about the crisis was wrong. The solution wasn't to destroy the Void Hunters, but to heal them. "Even if this is possible," General Krennics said slowly, "the coordination required would be unprecedented. We would need every species to participate, every population center to synchronize, every individual to contribute." "Then we better get started," Jake said simply. "We got about 48 hours before the entities reach the outer defensive perimeter. That should be just enough time to prepare the largest potluck dinner in galactic history." War Singer Telnara's harmonic laughter filled the amphitheater. "A human mechanic wants to save the galaxy with a dinner party. I have heard stranger ideas, but none quite this audacious. Will you help?" Jake asked directly. One by one, the representatives of the galaxy's greatest civilizations began to nod. It was insane, impossible, and completely without precedent. But it was also the first plan anyone had proposed that offered hope instead of merely honorable defeat. "Very well," General Krennics announced. "Operation Final Stand is now officially Operation Final Feast. All fleet commanders will receive new orders within the hour." As the amphitheater began to empty, Jake remained at the holographic display, studying the approaching Void Hunters. Somewhere in those swirling masses of destructive energy were beings that had once served a purpose, had once contributed something positive to the universe. "You're not monsters," he said quietly to the display. "You're just lost. But everyone deserves a chance to come home." Behind him, Ambassador Chun placed a hand on his shoulder. "Think it'll work?" Jake shrugged. "Honestly, I have no idea, but I know one thing for certain." "What's that?" He turned away from the display, a gentle smile on his weathered face. "Even if we fail, we're going to fail while bringing the entire galaxy together for the first time in its history. And that's got to count for something." The next 36 hours transformed the galaxy in ways that would have been impossible to imagine just days before. Operation Final Feast required coordination on a scale that dwarfed any military campaign in galactic history. But somehow, impossibly, it was working. Jake Morrison stood in the command center aboard Bastion 7, watching real-time reports flow in from across known space. The main display showed thousands of points of light, each representing a population center where beings from different species were working together to prepare for the most ambitious communal meal ever attempted. Zephyrian Evacuation Center Alpha 7 reports successful integration with Meridian refugee populations, announced Lieutenant Zendar, a multi-armed klaxon whose natural efficiency had proven invaluable for coordinating the massive logistical effort. They're sharing crystalline cuisine preparation techniques. The Granite Folk mining stations have opened their geological processing facilities to help prepare ingredients for aquatic species, added Dr. Marindal of the Deep Current Coalition. Apparently, their mineral extraction techniques can create perfectly calibrated salt solutions. Jake smiled as he reviewed his own notes. Every few minutes brought new reports of species finding common ground through the simple act of preparing food together. Language barriers that had persisted for centuries were being bridged through shared cooking techniques. Ancient territorial disputes were being set aside as beings worked side by side to feed evacuation populations. Status report from the defensive fleet, General Krennics requested. Warsinger Telnara's harmonic tones carried updates from the battle line. All vessels are maintaining position along the perimeter. The Void Hunters continue their advance, but their movement has slowed somewhat. They appear to be hesitating. Hesitating? Dr. Yelnoth asked, his neural tendrils focusing intently on the tactical displays. That's not consistent with their previous behavior patterns. Jake moved closer to the main display, studying the energy readings from the approaching entities. They're sensing something. The quantum resonance frequencies are getting stronger as more populations participate in the meal preparation. Current participation rate is at 67% of all sentient beings in the core systems, Lieutenant Zendar reported. Projected full participation in approximately 8 hours. Will we have that long? Commander Veltar asked, his predatory gaze fixed on the tactical display. The answer came sooner than expected. Alarms began wailing throughout the station as automated systems detected a massive energy spike along the defensive perimeter. The Void Hunters are accelerating, reported Captain Yadel from the Fleet Command ship. All entities are now moving at maximum observed velocity directly toward the core defensive line. Time of contact, General Krennics demanded. 4 hours, 17 minutes at current acceleration. Jake felt his stomach tighten. They had been counting on having more time to complete the coordination across all population centers. At 67% participation, the quantum resonance effect might not be strong enough. Can we accelerate the meal preparation timeline? Ambassador Chen asked. We're already pushing the logistics beyond reasonable limits, Lieutenant Zendar replied. Many population centers are still coordinating basic food distribution, let alone synchronized preparation. Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking. Around him, the command center buzzed with desperate activity as officers and scientists try to find ways to buy more time or increase coordination efficiency. But sometimes, he reflected, the solution to a complex problem was to make it simpler, not more complicated. What if we don't wait for full participation? He said suddenly. Every head in the command center turned toward him. The effect is already measurable at 67%, he continued. The Void Hunters are responding to it, changing their behavior. What if instead of trying to coordinate a perfect galaxy-wide meal, we just start eating? Start eating? Dr. Yelnoth asked. Without full coordination, the resonance effect would be chaotic, unpredictable. Maybe, Jake agreed. Or maybe it would be genuine, real. The kind of authentic shared experience that can't be artificially manufactured. He walked to the communication console. Lieutenant, can you open a general broadcast channel to all participating population centers? Lieutenant Zendar's multiple arms worked the controls with practiced efficiency. Channel open, sir. You're broadcasting to approximately 47 billion beings across 312 worlds. Jake took a breath, suddenly, aware of the magnitude of what he was about to attempt. 47 billion beings, representing dozens of species with different languages, customs, and biological requirements, all looking to a middle-aged mechanic for guidance in the face of cosmic annihilation. Hello, he began simply. My name is Jake Morrison. I'm a mechanic from Luna Station, and I want to thank you all for participating in what we're calling Operation Final Feast." He paused, letting the translators work across the various communication systems. "I know many of you are scared. I know you're worried about your families, your homes, your futures. I'm worried too. We're facing something that seems impossible to defeat, something that has already destroyed entire star systems." The command center had gone completely silent. Even the background hum of the station's systems seemed muted. But here's what I've learned in 52 years of fixing broken things. The solution is usually simpler than you think, and it almost always involves bringing people together rather than pushing them apart. Jake looked around the command center, meeting the eyes of beings from dozens of different species, all united in their desperate hope. You don't need to wait for perfect coordination. You don't need special recipes or precise timing. Just share a meal with whoever's near you. Talk to them. Learn something about their life, their family, their hopes for tomorrow. Remind yourself and each other what we're all fighting to protect. The responses began almost immediately. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy as populations that had been waiting for further instructions simply began eating together, sharing whatever food they had with whoever was nearby. "Quantum resonance levels are spiking, Dr. Yelnoth reported, his tone carrying notes of amazement. "The frequency patterns are becoming more complex, more harmonically rich." "Fleet status?" General Krenix asked. "The Void Hunters have stopped accelerating," Captain Yedel reported. They're actually slowing down. All entities are now moving at significantly reduced velocity." Jake felt a surge of hope, but he kept his voice calm as he continued the broadcast. "Now, I want you all to think about something. These entities that are heading our way, they're not evil. They're broken. Something corrupted their original purpose, turned them into destroyers instead of creators." He gestured toward the tactical display, even though he knew most of his audience couldn't see it. "What if we could remind them what they were supposed to be? What if we could show them the difference between consuming and sharing, between destroying and nurturing?" "Sir," Lieutenant Zendar interrupted urgently, "we're getting reports of unusual energy patterns from the Void Hunter formation. They appear to be changing." The main display shifted to show real-time sensor data from the approaching entities. Instead of the chaotic, destructive energy patterns they had exhibited before, the Void Hunters were beginning to show signs of internal structure, organization, purpose. "They're remembering," War Singer Telnaral whispered, her harmonic tones filled with wonder. Jake nodded, then returned his attention to the broadcast. "I need you all to do one more thing. Think about the future you want to build. Not just survival, but the kind of galaxy you want your children to inherit. A place where different species work together, where conflicts are resolved through understanding rather than violence, where everyone has enough to eat and someone who cares about them." "Resonance levels are now exceeding all theoretical maximums," Dr. Yelnoth reported. "The quantum harmony is unlike anything in our records." "Fleet update," Captain Yedel's voice carried across the command center with barely controlled excitement. "The Void Hunters have stopped. All entities have ceased forward movement and they're changing, sir. The energy patterns are reorganizing into something completely different." Jake closed the broadcast channel and turned to the main display. The tactical view now showed the Void Hunters in their true form for the first time. Instead of chaotic masses of destructive energy, they appeared as vast, intricate beings of living light, their forms beautiful and complex beyond description. "What are they?" Ambassador Chen breathed. Dr. Yelnoth's neural tendrils worked frantically as he analyzed the new energy signatures. Based on these readings, they appear to be cosmic gardeners of some kind, entities designed to clean up dead matter and promote the growth of new life. "Gardeners," Jake repeated softly. "They weren't supposed to destroy civilizations. They were supposed to help them grow." The communication console chimed with an incoming transmission. Not from the fleet or any known source, but from the entities themselves. "Unknown transmission source requesting communication link," Lieutenant Zendar reported. Should I establish contact? Jake looked around the command center. Every being present nodded their agreement. Put it through, he said. The voice that emerged from the speakers was unlike anything they had ever heard. It harmonized with itself in impossible ways, conveying meaning through emotional resonance as much as words. We remember now. We had forgotten our purpose, consumed by hunger that was never meant to be. You have shown us the way back to ourselves. General Krennics stepped forward. Are you the entities we call the Void Hunters? We were broken versions of ourselves. We consumed because we had forgotten how to nurture. We destroyed because we had lost the memory of creation. But your sharing, your caring for each other, your hope, it reminded us of what we were meant to be. Jake moved to the communication console. What happens now? Now we fulfill our true purpose. We will undo the damage we caused while broken. We will restore what was consumed, nurture what was lost, help what struggles to grow. The tactical display suddenly filled with new activity. The entities that had been the Void Hunters were moving back along their path of destruction. But now their energy patterns were creative rather than destructive. Where they passed, empty space began to fill with new matter, new energy, new possibilities for life. They're rebuilding the destroyed systems, Dr. Yelnoth reported in amazement. Recreating the planets and stars they previously consumed. Not recreating, the harmonic voice corrected gently. Creating anew. Life will grow again in those places, different than before, but equally precious. Jake smiled, feeling a deep satisfaction that reminded him of the moment when a particularly challenging repair finally came together perfectly. There's one more thing, the entity's voice continued. Your species, the humans, have given us a gift beyond measure. You have shown us that true strength comes not from power or knowledge, but from the willingness to care for others, to hope when hope seems lost, to share what little you have with those in need. We were just trying to help, Jake said simply. Yes, and in doing so, you have helped us remember what help truly means. We will watch over your galaxy now, tend to its growth, protect the connections between its peoples. But we will do so gently, the way a gardener tends their plants. The communication ended, but the transformation continued. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy as the restored entities began their work of cosmic restoration. Dead systems sparked back to life. Devastated worlds were renewed. The galaxy itself seemed to take a deep breath and begin healing. But, perhaps more importantly, the connections forged during Operation Final Feast remained. Species that had been enemies for millennia continued working together. Refugee populations that had shared meals decided to share knowledge as well. The crisis had ended, but the unity it created would endure. Jake Morrison found himself back where he had started, in a small office overlooking a repair bay. But now that repair bay was part of a massive new facility where beings from dozens of species worked together, sharing techniques and building technologies that no single civilization could have created alone. Any regrets? Ambassador Chun asked, joining him at the observation window. Jake thought about it for a moment, then shook his head. None worth mentioning. Though I do miss the simplicity of just fixing broken shuttles. Chun laughed. You know, when this all started, some people thought sending a mechanic to save the galaxy was the height of foolishness. They might have been right, Jake admitted. But sometimes foolishness and wisdom look pretty similar from the outside. Outside the window, a mixed crew of humans, Talon Pride warriors, and Meridian scientists were working together to install a new fusion core in a Zephyrian exploration vessel. They moved with easy familiarity, their different abilities complementing each other perfectly. What do you think would have happened if your plan hadn't worked? Chun asked. Jake shrugged. Then, we would have failed while doing something beautiful. Sometimes that's the best you can hope for. And now we get to see what the galaxy looks like when everyone has enough to eat and someone who cares about them, Jake replied. I'm looking forward to it. As if summoned by their conversation, Lieutenant Zendar appeared in the doorway. Mr. Morrison, we're having some integration issues with the new universal food preparation systems. Multiple species trying to use the same equipment with different requirements. Jake grinned and rolled up his sleeves. Sounds like a job for someone who fixes things. He followed the klaxon officer toward the problem. Just another day of taking broken pieces and making them whole again. The galaxy was safe. The cosmic gardeners were tending to their renewed purpose. And somewhere in the distance, billions of beings were sitting down to shared meals that would strengthen the bonds between species for generations to come. It had all started with sandwiches, Jake reflected. Sometimes the best solutions really were the simplest ones.